Okay. Welcome to our show for Catholic Party for America, where we are truly for America and want to restore our nation back to Jesus Christ. And we are with Brother Alexis Bonallo.
Thank you, AJ. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about Catholic Party America and the real political change or revolution that we need in the United States, and especially today to talk about this historic ruling of the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah. So yesterday was a huge ruling in favor of religious freedom and everything for Christians, especially Catholics, by the Supreme Court against Maine. What was the ruling?
So the state of Maine and many parts of its territory does not have public high schools. Maine might seem a very small state to most of you out west, and it is in comparison, but it's like half of all the area of New England. New England is the part of the United States that's east of New York State. And it's like vast areas of just, forest and rivers and lakes and swamps, and like almost no one lives there. So in many towns, there's no public high school, and so the parents have no other choice but to send their children to a private school, and some of them are religious schools. So the state decided to fund private schools so that the tax monies that their families are already paying for schools will go to those schools. Now, in the East, unlike most other states, there is no school tax attached to your tax bill from the town. You just get a standard property tax, and the town portions of that according to the needs of the town, to whether it's the administration in the town hall or the schools. So it's all one comprehensive tax. You can't escape it if you're a property owner. But consequently, all public schooling is free because that was actually the original purpose of the property tax. And the Maine passed this law that would give money to private schools where there were no public high schools available. However, the law had a clause saying that any school where religious education was given, regardless of the religion, would not be eligible. And they set the restrictions in such a way that 20 schools were excluded. I don't think all religious schools were excluded, because it had to be not only a school sponsored by a religious organization, but a school where religious instruction was given. And of those 20 schools, 15 were Catholic schools. So it seems the criteria was designed to exclude Catholics. Now, that kind of prejudice might seem to some people unimaginable. But in New England, it has been the tradition for 170 years. And the Supreme Court ruled that the narrow limiting of the distribution of state funding to private schools could not discriminate on the basis of religion. And the desire to do that, to protect separation of church and state, goes beyond the requirements of the Constitution. So they struck down that section of the law as unconstitutional. And the lawsuit was brought by a mother whose daughter was attending a Protestant school. I think it's not even a Catholic one, a Protestant one. And this is an absolutely amazing historic thing. Catholics have been praying for the overturning of these prejudicial laws for 170 years. And it seemed like no hope in sight. And actually, I'm surprised that even this court handed down this decision.
Yeah. And you wanted to know about the Know Nothing Party.
Yeah. Okay. So AJ is going to tell us about the Know Nothing Party because, well, you might know nothing about the Know Nothing Party, but they're the ones that are all behind this kind of prejudice. And if you're from Massachusetts, you know about the Know Nothing Party because I think it was founded in the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts in the 1850s had something like a third of all the votes in Congress because it was most popular, one of the most populous states in the early United States. Now, not so much so, but they had a lot of great influence. So what and who was the Know Nothing Party? When did they begin, and where did they go, and are they around today?
Yeah. So the Know Nothing Party was a nativist political party and movement in the United States in the mid 1850s. The party was officially known as the Native American Party prior to 1855, and thereafter simply known as the American Party. Now, to distinguish this, they're not talking about the Native American uh, people. They're talking about Native Protestant born Americans. So the Know Nothings were originally a secret society of men who opposed Roman Catholicism, Irish, and other Roman Catholic immigration. In many respects, they were a populist and xenophobic movement. The party was progressive in its stances on issues of labor rights and the need for more government spending, and furnished support for an expansion of the rights of women, the regulation of industry, and the support of measures that were designed to improve the status of working people. It was a forerunner of the temperance movement in the United States. The Know Nothing movement briefly emerged as a major political party in the form of the American Party. Members of the movement were required to say, "I know nothing," whenever they were asked about its specifics by outsiders, providing the group with its colloquial name.
Now that I learned, you just learned something. So the Know Nothing Party, what's something about their history on education? What was their involvement in this?
So, yeah, so let's see. Let's see. And I guess like, alrighty. Let's see here. Do they even cover? Okay. Railroads, insurance. The purification of Massachusetts against divisive social evils is a high priority. Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here we go. The legislators. All right, here we go. It passed legislation to regulate railroads, insurance companies, and public utilities. It funded free textbooks for the public schools and raised the appropriations for local libraries and for the school for the blind. Purification of Massachusetts against divisive social evils was a high priority. The legislators set up the state's first reform school for juvenile delinquents while trying to block the importation of supposedly subversive government documents and academic books from Europe. It upgraded the legal status of wives, giving them more property rights and more rights in divorce court. It passed harsh penalties on speakeasies, gambling houses, bordellos. It passed prohibition legislation and penalties that were so stiff, such as 6 months in prison for serving one glass of beer, that juries refused to convict defendants. Many of the reforms are quite expensive. State spending rose 45% on top of 50% hike in annual taxes on cities and towns. This extravagance angered the taxpayers, and a few know-nothings were reelected.
Okay, so it was their funding of school books, and that was where, when before that, there was state funding for all schools, even religious schools, because you might have not learned this in your American history course in high school, but all the colonies had established churches before the Constitution was founded, and Massachusetts was the Congregational Church, and if you were not a member of the Congregational Church, you weren't even allowed to vote. And also, obviously, the school run by the Congregational Church was the public school, and you were taught the religion of Congregationalists in that school. And Catholics were even forbidden to go to college in Europe. Massachusetts, you were fined £5 if your son disappeared and went to Europe because they presumed he was studying at a Catholic college, and God forbid he was becoming a priest.
Yeah.
So once the Constitution was passed, that system didn't change. There was still state funding of all these schools, but then it spread out to schools of, Lutherans, or if you're in Massachusetts, then Lutheran Anglican schools could get it, and Catholic schools would even get it. Well, the Catholics didn't have schools. In 1790s, there was hardly any Catholics in the country. I think when the Constitution was signed, there was maybe like 48 Catholic priests in the entire United States, and they were mostly from Baltimore. And probably they were big patrons of Charles Charlton of Baltimore. And you wonder what the background is here. That's his estate, one of the landed Catholic families of the United States, one of the old ones. And so there was no problem about it. The Know Nothings is like, we have to do something about it because hordes of socially divisive people are emigrating to the United States. It wasn't even quotas. It was like anyone came, you could become a citizen. There was no immigration service, so the Irish and the Germans started coming over en masse, but mostly first the Germans and then the Irish. And Germans and Irishmen don't look very much different from the colonists who are already here, so you really couldn't tell them unless they opened their mouth and start speaking. You didn't know what their religion is, but no one came over who looked like me with tan skin from Southern Europe. We weren't coming yet into the 1860s. So that's what these laws were about. And they took all funding away from Catholic schools. They figured that will do them in. They can't pay to run a whole school. They're poor rabble from Europe. But the Catholic Church went on to build one of the biggest systems of education in the United States as separate of public schools, all on the backs of Catholics who had to pay the public tax for public schools, but were sending their kids to Catholic schools and paying again on top of that. So it's not like Catholics haven't been supporting public schools. We have. We've been supporting two school systems. We've been paying twice. So it was just outrageous, the prejudice. But in those days, the prejudice was so bad, there were signs like saying, help needed, Irishmen and dogs need not apply.
Yeah. So,
and that's the level of prejudice there was.
So the Know Nothings were founded in 1844.
And do they exist today, or did they dissolve into something else?
Oh, they exist. So they first merged with the American Republican Party. Then they merged again with the American Republican Party, Whig Party. And they finally decided to go with one name, the Republican Party that exists today.
So the grand old party is the nativist American Know Nothing Party.
And their secret wing of the party is called the Order of the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, really? And it's this Order of the Star Spangled Banner still exists in the GOP?
Let's see.
It might still exist?
Yeah, it might still exist.
Well, this is getting me thinking here because they're opposed to immigrants, Catholic immigrants.
And we're going to, and right here it says something about a guy we covered in a previous show for Florida Military Radio TV.
Oh, really? Okay, what?
To join the order, a man had to be at least 21 years old, a Protestant, and willing to obey the order's dictates without question. Members were nativists, citizens opposed to immigration, especially by Catholics. They saw Catholics as dangerous, illegal voters under the control of the Pope in Rome. Members invariably responded to questions about the OSSP by claiming that they knew nothing. This practice caused newspaper editor Horace Greeley to label them Know Nothings. The OSSB would eventually form the nucleus of the nativist Know Nothing movement, which ran candidates in 1855 and 1856 under the American Party ticket. And
And so the initials for this party were the OSSB. Well, you know, the OSS, that was U.S. military intelligence, which became the CIA, which is Skull and Bones. But you know, the Republican Party is always whining about illegal immigration. But is it illegal immigration from non-Catholic countries?
No.
They never talk about that. Matter of fact, when people have to flee from the Mideast, it's like, open the doors.
Yeah.
So it's just immigrants from the southern border. Well, what religion are they?
Catholic.
Mostly. There are some are Protestants too, but mostly Catholic. So you can see their politics hasn't changed anything. And promoting divorce too. And that's, you know, white racism. So some things haven't changed. So it's quite surprising what the Supreme Court did, because the justices who ruled in this favor, I think, were all named by Republicans, but they're all Catholics too. And so, you know, you can betray your religion in 1,000 ways. But when it comes to parochial schools, you grew up Catholic, you know what those are, and you're not going to, you know. So there might be some politics in issuing this ruling before their expected ruling on Roe v. Wade. But nevertheless, it is a historic moment, and I never thought I'd live to see the day.
So, what are your thoughts on this ruling?
This, I think, is going to be the most important ruling by the Supreme Court in this century for changing the face of America and converting this nation to Jesus Christ. It's going to be more important than the ruling on Roe v. Wade. And why? Yes, if Roe v. Wade is struck down, abortion will become illegal in many states, not all states. So women who still want abortions can get abortions, will be less convenient. But the women who want abortions generally aren't strong Christian believers. So the children being killed, which is a horrible crime, they're basically killing people who aren't Christians or wouldn't be raised in Christian households. And that doesn't change the sin, but from a demographic effect in the United States, it won't have much effect. But allowing religious schools to get equal funding, this is going to be absolutely tremendous. It will lead to the destruction of the public, secular, Marxist, Masonic school system. It is its death nail. This is the wooden stake in the heart of the vampire. And this is absolutely amazing, because now states can pass laws where they can fund these schools. And as soon as they fund them, well, you know, if little Johnny going to St. Mary Magdalene's Catholic school is only getting $5,000 from the town, and if he went over to the public high school would get $8,000, then that's discrimination. The Catholic parents could sue. So, you know, I'll give you an example. I used to live in Mansfield, Massachusetts with my older brothers. And there was a Catholic school there, and they raised, I think, 10 or 30 million to build this school. And then they had to charge like $3,000 a year per student, and it could only take, I think, a maximum of 150 students. And the parents were outraged. So we gave you all this money to build a school, and we have to pay this high tuition because that's what it costs to run a school. Across the street, literally, was the baseball and football fields of the public schools of Mansfield. And the city raised $65 million, and we built all those schools in recent years before I came to town. And you know what the average annual spending per student in the public school system was? It was like 12 to 14,000. And the Catholic school was running on 3,500. So you can imagine what a Catholic school could do with an extra 3 times the income. I mean, you're going to have bishops and the pastors of Catholic churches running construction companies and saying, we're going to build a Catholic school. Because if we can do it for 3,000, we get 10,000. Well, you know, all of a sudden we can hire massive number of faculties. We can go to the bank and say, we'd like a loan to build a $30 million Catholic school. And before it was like, don't talk to us, but now it's going to be like, oh yeah, you're going to get all this public money. Father, sit down and we'll sign the loan. How many you want? 30 million, 50 million, 100 million? You know? So this means every parent, Catholic and non-Catholic, can say, do I want to send Johnny to the school where they had drag queens doing, seminars on sexuality when he's like in 3rd grade? Or do I want to send him to the Catholic school where, Sister Nolan is going to teach them about the 10 Commandments? You know what most parents are going to say. I think even many non-Christian parents are going to say, I'm going to send my kid to the Catholic school because it's my taxpayer money. I'm going to choose what I want. I don't want Marxist education. I don't want trans education. I don't want, all these strange people around my kid grooming her. I'm going to send them to the Catholic school, which has all these strict regulations now because of all the problems it used to be. And Catholic schools are no longer run by clergy or nuns, it's mostly lay people, but and even common secularists are going to say, well, Catholics have been around 2,000 years. They know culture, they know history. They have writers in Greek and Latin and European languages. If I send my kid to that school, chances are he's going to get a better cultural and education and history. Before I send him to the local school, they're teaching him about, what happened under Bill Clinton, what happened before Bill Clinton doesn't exist, because it's Marxist and they don't want you to know the past. So the end result is, I think within 10 years, no one will want to send their kid to a public school anymore. And this is up to high school. And if states are funding universities, if a private university is getting state money or federal money, well, Catholic universities can get it now too. Mm-hmm. And most Catholic schools have avoided instruction in the Catholic religion because they feared losing the money. They feared they had to take that cross off of the wall, because most federal funding, if you were using a church hall to care for the poor, under Obama, you had to take the cross down before you could serve lunch. It was that kind of ridiculousness. So this is going to transform anything. This is going to lead to a huge construction boom in Catholic institutions, and not just those run by the diocese, any private organization that wants to run a Christian school, whether they're Protestant or Catholic. So when I heard this, I was saying, this is like a dream of dreams. My mother and father were both educators. My mother taught elementary school her whole life. If she were alive today, she'd be dancing and breaking out the spumante because she'd say, let's start a Catholic school. And it's absolutely amazing what's going to happen. So this means the next generation is going to be educated in Catholic schools. And that is going to have a tremendous impact. Because if this Supreme Court made such a good decision, because the majority of them were Catholics, and they didn't go, I don't know if they even went to Catholic schools. Imagine what the statesmen, politicians, and judges a generation from now are going to be thinking and doing if they went to Catholic schools that were financed because of this Supreme Court justice ruling. Supreme Court ruling. It's, as an anthropologist say, this is absolutely tremendous. This is going to lead to the conversion of the United States to the Catholic faith. It might take time, but it is because culturally, the Catholic Church is superior to every other religion. We're absolutely superior. If we marshal all our intellectual, artistic, cultural, even, for example, if you wanted to open up an institute, a high school dedicated to the study of arts, of course you're going to do it Catholic. Think of all the composers who are Catholic, all the artists, all the sculptors, the finest ones of Europe, were either Catholic or Orthodox. And you're going to want to draw from that. And what better way to draw on that tradition and instruct children in it, but also have religious classes. Mm-hmm. So, as far as us religious concerned, we want to get people are going to be calling us all on the phone saying, brother, can you be an instruction religion in our school? And before we'd say, I have so much time to do, something like, now they say, we can pay you $55,000, Sister Mary Jones is going to, let me speak to Mother Superior. So it will help your religious life because institutes dedicated to teaching can now bring in a sizable amount of income for their monasteries. Mm-hmm. I bet those traditional Dominican sisters down in Tennessee and Kentucky, wherever they are, they're just going, this, you know, they probably were dancing in their courtyard when they heard that after Vespers. So it's an absolutely wonderful ruling, and it's ended 170 years of bigotry. And the liberals, their heads are exploding, you know, and because they realize what's happened.
Yeah. When I saw the news, it's like, first I was like, I didn't see no tweets about it. I didn't see no news from it. I was like, what was this? I just saw your tweets on it. Then I saw, I think a reporter from OANN News or something tweet about it, and she linked the actual decision, of the Supreme Court's PDF down in Sweden. And I was like, was he reading our website?
Yeah, so the Washington Post, which is a CIA front, they ran an article written by a Jew who works for Bloomberg saying that this ruling destroyed free speech. You know? Now, you couldn't possibly, by any juridical interpretation, say it destroyed free speech, unless by free speech you means the obligation to toe the Marxist secular Masonic line without any right to say anything else. And that's what actually they mean by the term. So it shows you that the Washington Post, which is considered a liberal paper, has taken an extreme leftist, anti-Christian position on this ruling. And this is why you're not going to hear anything about it. You're not going to hear about it even mentioned by the Republicans because they're the know-nothing party. This is something none of the parties are going to want to talk about. But this is something that each of us in our own town now start to militate for. You need to go to your town and say, look, if you are taking money from me to educate Johnny in the public school, well, the Supreme Court says I have the right, you know, to have education, choose my education, and you should be funding the Catholic school. Why aren't you sending any funds to the Catholic school? This Catholic school has 200 kids in town, and you're not giving them any funding. Whereas if they were at the public school, you're giving them $10,000 a year. You're robbing our tax money. So now there's actually a legal precedent. They could say you're misappropriating public funds because you are not giving them the Catholic school. Even in states that don't have the laws like Maine, you could sue them now for misappropriation because you're saying you are purposely excluding certain schools in town which are rendering the equivalent of public education to taxpayers of this town, but you are discriminating against them on basis of religion. So there's going to be a lot of lawsuits and a lot of state statutes are going to be wiped out. And a lot of towns are going to have to judge a budget. And this is going to cause a lot of Marxists to howl because, you know, once half the students in the high school aren't going to the high school anymore, well, you have to fire, you know, Mrs. Drag Queen or Mr. Drag Queen or Miss Transgendered and, you know, Miss Marxist and Mr. Lenin. And, you know, where are they going to get jobs anymore? No one's going to want to hire them because that's not where the parents want to send their kids. You know, maybe they can start a Marxist institute if they want and claim that's their new religion and get funding that way, but it's like they're not going to get. No one's going to trust children to people like that. And no one's going to entrust children to people who are pushing agendas that lead to contraception and abortion. So it's the end of them. It's the going to implode their thing. So I expect now that they're going to try to push for some kind of federal law to undo that ruling, which they can't. They'd have to do a constitutional amendment, and they'll never get that. So their goose is cooked. So the only thing left for them is violence, extreme violence. So I hope it doesn't happen, but don't be surprised they start burning Catholic schools down in the United States the way they burned them down in Canada last year. Because you know, this is just, you know, if you scratch a Marxist who's always talking about tolerance, you'll find someone who's ready to take out an AK-47 assault rifle and shoot you dead, even though he's always talking about gun rights.
Yeah. So the first thing I saw when you tweeted it out was about the idea of the restoration of the religious military schools. And I was thinking, yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, you've always been an admirer of the Virginia Military Institute. Tell everyone something about that, those who don't know, and why it was so important in
So
U.S. history.
the Virginia Military Institute trained a lot of the early American generals. We donated General Lee. He was the commandant of West Point, but he donated family land to help get the institute up and going. And his family went there. Then his family under the Mercers went there. His family of the under the Pattons went there. So it's just a big time military school, but it is not sure what uh, Christian faith is in Virginia.
I think it was Episcopalian.
Yeah, but it was very, very Christian and high ideals, high morals, high standards, and better quality and training than you got at West Point when and Lee even said it was better than West Point, and he called West Point Den of Vipers.
So what kind of dreams are you dreaming, AJ?
That we would for the order we would restore we would do we would imitate the VMI but restore it somewhere where that's friendly, like Kansas or somewhere. And instead of Episcopalian, be 100% Catholic. Um, train them in, like you said, archery, horseback riding. I think I put the English longbow, compound bow, the crossbow, and archery on the horseback riding. I put the modern U.S. cavalry riding, the 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 Frankish Crusader horseback riding, and the ancient Hungarian riding where they.
And maybe even you could get the state to pass a special statute letting the students to actually use arms and learn how to use them. But can you imagine the impact this would have on Catholic civilization in the whole world, but especially in the United States and in our armed forces, if we had a high school, a boarding school, where you could have, 1,000 students at 250 in each grade studying the military arts in high school and getting a good classical education so that they could go on to the military academies in the United States. I think all our students would get those congressional appointments, and we'd overflow all the military academies with good Catholic leaders who follow good Catholic practices, and not to mention all the other students who go on to careers in security or things like that. That would be tremendous. That would totally shatter this whole false view of Catholicism and Christianity as a religion of pacifism. And the bishops would never found a school like this. No.
But the religion, the stuff that would be taught would be the algebra, trigonometry, calculus, real American history, world history, the books by Sutton, good Catholic literature, Alphonsus Liguori, Augustine, all of, and the writings of George Patton and others.
It would be absolutely tremendous. So this is something I would totally agree with. You'd need probably 250 million to build a big enough campus, all the buildings and things like that. Yeah. But who's to say who's going to listen to this video someday? And if you have 250 million, or you think you can help us raise that money, we'll build a Catholic Military Institute, and that will change American history. And but we could also get funding for the students once they're there now with this law, if it's put in a state where they give state funding for schools.
Yeah. So. The Virginia Military Institute does it all on about 200 acres.
They don't do guns anymore. The anti-gun movement got control of their faculty, and they don't even teach the students to shoot anymore, which is absurd. Which means if we Catholics founded one where the students learn to use arms, we'd even have non-Catholics wanting to attend that school. And so this is what true Catholic activity in public life demands that we establish institutions who are going to be the foundations of civilization in our own countries. We should not relegate that solely to the secular sphere or solely to the public institutions of the state. We can certainly do it ourselves. We have enough money. We just have to get our act together and stop bickering among others. Now, I think as far as Catholic Party for America, AJ, didn't you even talk about public funding of Catholic schools?
Yeah, it did. Public schools, private schools, home schools, everything.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court's actually taken up one of the party platforms of Catholic Party America. Shows you that Catholic Party America is not just, some silly enterprise. It's actually, been right now on the cultural war. And I'd like to say something about that Catholics. You have to be, there's a lot of Catholics that talk about cultural camp, the cultural war. There's even Crisis magazines always talking about the cultural war. But Catholics don't fight the cultural war. They let themselves get rolled over with a steamroller. It's not just a matter of fighting this anti-Catholic legislation, make sure not get passed. That's like, making sure you don't fall off the cliff. You shouldn't be on the edge of the cliff. So if you're fighting a cultural war on the edge of the cliff, you're not using the right tactics or the right strategy. You need to build Catholic institutions and be on the highland in the fortress where your enemies have no way to even scale the walls. So you need to be doing. And founding a Catholic school, founding a Catholic military high school, those would be the greatest ways you could have an impact on society in the state where you are. And don't wait for the bishops. There's a lot of good Catholic educators out there who have doctorates and masters in education, who were school teachers, who are retired. You know what I'm saying is right. And you need to get your act together and start collaborating with Catholics in your community to get this done. Don't think your life is over. A new battlefield has now opened, and this is one we can easily win on. So we Catholics need to mobilize, and hopefully this program will be seen and shared. So if you have kids and you're worried about your children and your grandchildren, share this program, because you may not have the money to found a Catholic school, but there are Catholics who have the money to do this. But the word has to get out there. And it's not important that we, each of us, found a school, but it's important that the schools get founded and someone starts doing it. So I hope this show will be like a clarion call to action. We really need to mobilize now. We shouldn't just ignore this ruling. This is like, T-bone steak on a golden platter. It's served right up to us Catholics now. So we got to be thankful to Jesus Christ too, because after all our sins of failing in the United States, our Lord has granted us something that we have desired for 170 years, the best of us. And we can now atone for many sins of toleration by doing something that's really Catholic.
Yep. So I've written up a thing on that military institution. Just wait and see what everybody else thinks on approval and all that before I really post it somewhere.
Okay, maybe we'll do a program on it, and we'll see kind of response. Also, if you're watching videos at Ordo Militaris Radio TV, whether they're the Catholic Party for America series or series that we do for Ordo Militaris, please like and share them and make a comment to show there's some human beings there. And because there are a lot of channels out there that give you absolutely, inane blather, I saw one really famous Catholic talking head who did a show on what you have to do to prepare for the next 90 days. And he made this last year. None of the things he said came to pass in that. And yet he still has like 250,000 people following him. So not many people follow Ordo Militaris Radio TV. And I think the quality of our programming is far superior, far more intelligent, far more coherent. And but unless you who are listening to this program share it, who's going to come to know of it?
Yeah. This is Catholic Party for America signing off. God save the Republic.
God save the Republic.